Hello and welcome to this week's Goddess Asteroid podcast. So I've been in deep listening mode, listening to other people, listening to the land. And as a result, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this week. So where my inner listening took me to, and especially listening to the land, was to the COP26 conference on climate change that's happening in Glasgow in the UK. Begins on the 31st of October and it runs until 12th of November. And I kind of got drawn into it. I tend to not pay attention to anything the government is doing. But I got drawn in through finding out about these pilgrims. Their project is called Listen to the Land, and they've been walking from London to Glasgow, along what's called the Spine of Albion. Very important, some of the prime ley lines in Britain, called the Belinus is the male and Ellen is the female line. And they've really inspired me. We're going to be having a local event here. And if you only get this far in this podcast, they're asking people for support by doing a sacred walk wherever you live in the world, just listening to the land. And if you're not able to do that, do prayer, intention, a simple ceremony, lighting a candle or whatever your intuition calls you to do. So what I'm going to do for the next couple of weeks is look at the really fascinating astrology that is going on around the COP26 and just general, that's like one event that, we're in this huge crisis as humanity. The earth is heating up. This time has been prophesied that this is the time under this intense pressure that we will make a great mutation or a quantum leap. And I really see in the astrology so much cause for optimism, and my hope is to share that with you over the next few weeks. Because I know how easy it is to feel cynical, to feel despondent, overwhelmed, indifferent, all these different play of energies going on and powerful emotions. So today I'm just going to focus on one little part of what's going on in the chart, and I'm projecting slightly ahead, although in the case of Ceres and Pallas Athena, what I'm saying is right for today as it is for the 31st. So they're actually standing still. And I'm also going to talk about the moon, and they're forming what's called a T-square. So this is where there's squares aspects in astrology. It's a challenging energy. It may be full of contradictions, paradoxes, uncomfortableness, and it kind of forces movement through trying to, reach some resolution of these inner and outer challenging forces. So let's begin with Ceres. If you haven't come across her, she is the first of the goddess asteroids to be discovered on the 1st of January 1801. And I want to focus on a key theme that I've learned about Ceres over many years. you know, I sort of realized quite early on in my astrological life that these goddess asteroids are what I've always been kind of drawn to. And in the years I was getting to know Ceres, I had an adopted child. And so I was really at this kind of front edge of understanding the impact on a child when they don't have a proper attachment to their mother, and how powerfully that can shape a person. And it has all kinds of impacts, especially on trust. You know, this initial mothering bond basically hardwires trust into our brains. Even things like faith are actually hardwired in. Breastfeeding is so important. You know, we didn't understand that in previous generations, but it's realized now that in this process of feeding the child, as you look at them, you know, the eye contact, the love is creating, it's actually bringing the brain to life. And for a young child who doesn't have that, they have to try and recreate it later, and they may have many behaviors, addictions, problems in relationships that stem from these early experiences. So for me, it's really interesting that Ceres is playing such a key role at this time, because I really feel I kind of had this moment of clarity one day that as humanity we have an attachment problem with Mother Earth, and so why is that? You know, why would we have that? Well, the astrologer Barbara Ann Clow wrote a book many years ago called Catastrophobia. And her idea was that we have a collective fear around, you know, some kind of massive disaster like the great floods, meteors hitting Earth. And we've never recovered from that. So we live in the state of like elevated fear, and kind of grasping, grabbing that comes from this initial trauma. And you could also say that religion and science have continued to create a foundation of us not feeling connected to Earth. You know, we're living in our minds by and large, especially if we're in a Western European, you know, which applies to America as well, kind of mindset. You know, we've been conditioned to really feel like we can solve problems from our mind. And as we can see, it's not really working. So, you know, we have to kind of return to indigenous wisdom, body wisdom, and listening to the land. These are all concepts that indigenous people have. Okay, so Ceres at the moment, she's been for a while in Gene Key 35. This is in Gemini, around, you know, that sort of early part of Gemini. And I want to talk about that first. She has actually just recently moved into Gene Key 16, line 6, but I feel that 35 really provides like a really amazing insight into what needs to happen right now. So it's a really interesting gene key. It's linked to the production of serotonin in the brain. And actually our first encounters with our caring, loving mother, what they produce is serotonin in the brain, so we feel really happy and trusting. And again, depending on that experience, may depend on our ability to create our own serotonin experiences. Now 35 is unique with the 41st gene key in that it's a standalone gene key in a codon, and this one is to 35 is to do with miracles and wormholes, and it's one of the only gene keys that we can really consciously enter into and work with. So the shadow here is hunger, you know, and this is one of the things that you will notice as a marked kind of shadow in anyone. You know, I feel like I discovered I had quite some attachment problems myself when I had my son. So there's this marked kind of longing and trying to meet this void inside yourself from outside. So the hunger can be literally for food, for drugs, for alcohol, for success, for recognition, for beauty, to be seen, to be acknowledged. You know, it's a painful feeling, that hunger. And I can't think of a single human being on this planet who I've ever met who has not experienced this this hunger in themselves. And our first response is to seek to find that serotonin peak outside ourselves in the environment, or we take things, you know, when people are depressed, we give them antidepressants to boost their serotonin. But there are actually ways that we can boost it much more naturally. Walking in nature, gratitude, feeling love. Anytime you feel love and connection to others, you are actually raising your serotonin level. And so one thing that's interesting to me is that the gift of this one is adventure. And I remember once years ago I had some coaching, and it took months and months. It was a really uncomfortable, painful experience where I felt like I was being sucked through a straw, you know, trying to kind of come to one thing that I really wanted. And the thing I finally came to was adventure, strangely enough. And but at the time, like, I remember I was spending like hundreds of pounds a month on supplements. I had like drawers crammed full of supplements, and somehow this realization just made me like stop doing that, you know, and realize it was actually something in myself that I was trying to nurture there. So essentially, like, what Ceres speaks to me of with this whole climate change, environmental issues, is that unless we address this hunger for more and more inside ourselves, that's really driving us at a genetic level, then, you know, we could go on a protest every day of our lives. It's not going to make the slightest bit of difference, really. And, you know, we could have the best people in government, and we won't ever address it unless each of us takes that incentive to go inward and address the source of our hunger and work on raising our serotonin levels in whatever ways we find. You know, I find doing yoga, breathing. In a number of really beautiful communities online where I teach astrology, Soul Tribe online. I'm getting this daily hit of love and community, and I can feel that that is really raising my serotonin levels. And I am someone who has historically had quite a lot of chronic depression from when I was very young and various times in my life. So I know what it feels like to be in that shadow of low serotonin and kind of like really difficult emotional place. And as I say, this is the one gene key where we can actually enter it. And as soon as we enter into the spirit of adventure, life is a big adventure. This is all a big adventure, pioneering a whole new way of living for humanity, you know, having hope for the future, faith in the Creator who is guiding and helping us. And once we make this leap into adventure as our way of being, then, you know, the boundlessness, which is the Siddhi, it has, you know, even just thinking about it, the spaciousness of boundlessness, the infinite possibilities in boundlessness. And I really feel, you know, the inner doors open to quantum leaps, miracles, and wormholes when we even open ourselves to the possibility of that boundless way of being. You know, to give generously, to be loving. In, you know, I know sometimes we hit something where it's really hard to be loving, but if we're always working towards being loving, we can't actually go wrong in what we're doing. And if you feel like, you know, you have to be really depressed and angry about what's going on in the world, you have to suffer too. You actually are going, in a way, you're creating more of a problem because you're increasing the that kind of shadow frequency of depression in the collective sphere. So this is what we want to be trying to raise ourselves and everyone else around us out of that kind of gloomy outlook and anger, which I feel too, you know, when I see the rainforest being cut down, or even a single tree can get me going, you know. But yeah, that's what we really have to kind of work on transcending, so we don't add to the problem. So now Ceres, as I say, she's just moved into Gene Key 16. This is part of the cross of planning. It's the shadow of indifference, the gift of versatility, and the Siddhi of mastery. So it feels to me like, you know, the indifference towards what's happening globally, whether that's the suffering of human beings, and the environment. We know also that in places that are the poorest in the world, global warming is having like a really detrimental effect. So whether you are into nature, whether you're into people, this is something we can't really afford to be indifferent about anymore. But indifference is, in a way, like one of our primal coping mechanisms. So we must also be compassionate that we, others, are indifferent, and move into the gift of versatility. Like, what are the options? And as soon as we're open and curious, then we have a pathway ahead. Answers will always come when we're open to being versatile, to trying new things. Then things will stream into our lives that give us that possibility. And it feels like one of the things to master right now is this raising of our frequency, the raising. Essentially, we're looking at it biologically. We want to raise our serotonin levels. That's it in a nutshell. And as soon as we're doing that, we're going into gift, and the possibility of Siddhi opens up, where we can take lots and lots of people with us in this raising up. So the question, in a way, is what are you going to do to raise your serotonin levels, daily? You need to do this daily. So there's so many options. As I say, walk in nature, wild swimming. It's going into winter here, so maybe not that one at the moment. But being by water, being by the ocean, playing with your animals, playing with your children, playing with your lover, being held by your lover, your partner. All of these things boost serotonin in really natural ways. And joining communities, there's lots of them now. I've heard of quite a few that people are having this experience. The Gene Keys community, for me, is a place that I really experience that heart-to-heart connection, vulnerability with others. And as I say, Soul Tribe Online, where I do astrology, is another such place, and I'm sure there's many out there, or there's things in your community that you can do as well. Okay, so my thing about being succinct is kind of dissolving here, but I'm trying to talk about less kind of things and more in depth. I think that is what my listening is saying. So, as I say, there's a T-square going on. So in a square to Ceres is Pallas Athena, and she's the warrior goddess. She's very androgynous. She's kind of the male within the female in a funny sort of way. So she was born from her father Zeus's head. So she hasn't quite come into the world through the normal womb channels, although she does have a mother called Metis. So it's very interesting that Pallas is in 37, because this is all about family alchemy, and it's about the equality of men and women is really at the center of this gene key. And Pallas in Pisces, I've been feeling that she's really dissolving our strong attachment to our gender. And so we have these terms now, gender neutrality. A lot more people are identifying not strongly with their gender anymore. And the way children are brought up now compared to when I was at school, girls did sewing and cooking and boys did woodwork. And I was always longing for what the boys were doing. So I was a real tomboy, really. And I have Pallas Athena really strong in my chart. So, there's this thing about gender being less and less important. I can wear male clothes if I want. No one's going to bat an eyelid. Men can wear female clothes if they want. And no one's really, compared to what would have happened some time ago, and depending on which country you're in, in Britain, it's, yes, you will get disapproval, but you won't get kind of stoned to death anyway. So there's more acceptance, but not everywhere, of course. But I feel this is what Pallas Athena's doing. So it's interesting to discover she's in this 37th gene key, which really has this as its foundation. And the shadow is weakness, and this is all about the weakness that's projected onto females and women. And so it's interesting as well because Pallas Athena is a really strong female archetype. Then we have the gift of equality and the Siddhi of tenderness. So this is also linked to Christ consciousness, this gene key. and the feminine forms of Christ consciousness. So, you know, so many people, including myself, are really feeling connected to the wisdom of Sophia, Mary Magdalene, this divine feminine consciousness, which actually is all these goddess asteroids represent different aspects of this divine feminine consciousness. And Pallas Athena in Pisces represents that bodhisattva, compassion, empathy, but also this, you know, the strength within women. And we're seeing that in the world. You know, we're seeing women stepping into new kinds of leadership roles, not trying to emulate that kind of alpha male, say in the way Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister, she just kind of stepped into that male model of doing things. Didn't challenge, or don't think really felt connected much in any way to the divine feminine, the feminine itself as leadership. So, you know, it's not just about women being in powerful positions, it's about women doing something different in powerful positions. And of course, men can do that as well. You know, men can be into the idea of, for example, one of my favorite concepts is we're all leaders in the circle. Wherever we are in ourselves, eventually we are all going to be leaders in the circle in the Aquarian age. And that is true equality. You know, we all have that potential within us. Okay, and then this is just on the day of the conference, and actually I put it as starting at 9 in the morning. That's a guess. But in Glasgow, 31st of October, and the moon is actually in Virgo in a T square here. So yeah, so we got Pallas in Pisces, Moon in Virgo opposite, and then we have Ceres in Gemini squaring. So you feel the tension there. So of course, Moon in Virgo, that's really beautiful for, you know, again, the goddess energy, connecting to earth consciousness, to the food that we eat. And the moon is in Gene Key 40 line 3, so exactly opposite, you know, that's the programming partner of 37. So yeah, so 40, the key words are exhaustion is the shadow frequency, resolve, you know, the commitment, the resolve to make the change, to push through the inertia, and then divine will is the Siddhi. And that really brings me to a wonderful end, because I really feel in the astrology, and this is why I love being an astrologer, because you can see the divine plan unfolding, and it feels such an honor to share that with whoever's watching. No idea on social media, I could just be talking to the net of light, and actually that would be fine anyway, you know. So but yeah, it feels, I just want to share this message of optimism, because yes, we have a struggle ahead, but I feel like this 35th Gene Key series are giving us a really simple answer that all of us can do, which is to raise our serotonin levels at this time, which will naturally raise our frequency and jump us out of this collective shadow and into the wormholes and quantum leaps that we all can feel them there at the edge. I can anyway, and I know other people can. So namaste, go in peace, and next week we'll be looking at other really amazing things in this chart around COP26. So keep posted and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll put a link to Soul Tribe online underneath, so if you're interested in finding out about that, it is a place with a subscription platform, but it's very reasonable, and as I say, you will definitely get your your serotonin hit every day in various ways. So thank you for listening. Bye.